Lifelong Learning, A Taste of PILLAR 2 are short presentations taught by PILLAR instructors in partnership with the Pikes Peak Library District. This program is made possible as the result of a grant from Next 50 Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to funding innovative, mission-driven initiatives that improve the lives of older adults and their caregivers. Hello, this is Sandy Halby with a Taste of PILLAR 2 presentation on Spencer Tracy and Katherine Hepburn, a Hollywood romance. First, we'll talk a little bit about Spencer Tracy. Spencer Bonaventure Tracy was born April 5th, 1900. His middle name actually came from an aunt who was a nun. He appeared on stage and in film 75 times. He had a reputation among his peers as being one of the screen's great actors. In fact, the American Film Institute ranked him as the 9th greatest male star in classic Hollywood cinema. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and was a hyperactive child. He was raised as a Catholic and at 9 years old was placed in the care of Dominican nuns in an attempt to alter his behavior. He loved motion pictures, though, and remarked that he would not have gone to school except he needed to learn to read the subtitles in movies. He liked reenacting movie scenes for friends. He was sent to Jesuit academies in an attempt to teach him discipline, and he actually enlisted in the United States Navy and became lifelong friends with Pat O'Brien. They actually enlisted in the Navy together. John Tracy, his father, really wanted his son to get a degree, but Spencer Tracy only finished his high school degree and went on to study a little bit in college, but really acting was what he wanted to do. He actually attempted to study medicine, was not successful at that. At Ripton College, when he was studying medicine for a very short period of time, he actually got the male lead playing in a play called The Truth. He got such good reviews, he formed a small troupe and went on to tour with the Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. He was offered a scholarship with that troupe, and as they say, the rest was history. He left medicine forever and began classes at that Academy of Dramatic Arts. And he made his New York debut in a play in October 1922 in a play called The Wedding Guests. He made his Broadway debut just 3 months later, playing a wordless robot in the play R.U.R. He worked in several small acting companies, but nothing permanent, and got his third shot at Broadway in a new role in George M. Cohan's play called Yellow. He swore that if the play failed, he would leave stock and work on a regular business and a regular job. But the play was good. It got good reviews. And he later said, "I'd have quit the stage completely if it hadn't been for George Cohan." Cohan later wrote a part specifically for Tracy in a play called The Baby Cyclone. It opened on Broadway in 1927 and proved to be an absolute hit. This is a photo of young Spencer Tracy when he was starting out in his young acting career. In February 1930, Tracy played the lead in a Broadway play called The Last Mile. He made 14 curtain calls and was lauded as one of the best young actors ever to come to Broadway. The play was a hit and ran for 289 performances. Around this time, Hollywood was looking for new stars for the talkies. Tracy was cast in a new movie and only performed on stage once more in his life. He said he would have been happy to stay on stage. He really didn't have movie star ambitions. But he acted in about 25 movies under a Fox Films contract. He had a reputation for being difficult, and of course, he was an alcoholic. In fact, in 1934, when Tracy failed to report for filming, he was found in a hotel room, virtually unconscious after a 2-week binge. He was removed from a Fox film payroll while recovering in a hospital, and then he was sued for $125,000 for delaying film production. But MGM wanted him, and Fox Films released him from his contract. Under MGM, he was paired with known actors, usually as a supporting role, and eventually became a box office draw on his own. In 1936, Tracy portrayed a priest in the movie San Francisco, which was the highest grossing film of 1936, and received his first Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Around this time, Tracy entered a self-imposed period of sobriety and continued to make hits for MGM. Tracy often portrayed priests in several films: San Francisco in 1936, Boys Town in 1938, and the sequel, Men of Boys Town, and The Devil at 4 O'Clock in 1961. One time in an interview reflecting on these roles, Tracy stated, "Every time I play a priest, every time I put on the clothes and the collar, I feel right away. Like they were mine, like I belonged in them. And that feeling of being, what's the word, an intermediary, is also always very appealing. Those were always my most comfortable parts." Clark Gable, the star of the movie San Francisco, admired Tracy's portrayal of the human and priest. When Tracy played Father Flanagan, he modeled his performance after the actual person, and they became close during filming. Tracy went on to a very successful career with MGM that included the movies like Libeled Lady, Captain's Courageous, Boys Town, Stanley and Livingston, Northwest Passage, Edison the Man, and then came the movie Woman of the Year and a new co-star, Katherine Hepburn. But let's back up just a little bit here. Tracy married his wife Louise in 1923, just after he graduated from the AADA, that Academy of Performing Arts that he went to in New York City. They had one son, John, in 1924. At 10 months old, Louise discovered John was deaf, but didn't tell Spencer until 3 months later. Spencer was devastated and suffered from lifelong guilt, thinking that John's hearing loss was punishment for his sins. And in 1930, John suffered from polio. He took up writing as therapy. They also had a daughter in 1932, Louise Susie. In 1933, however, Tracy left his family and lived for the most part in hotels. Tracy and Louise were surprisingly open about their separate living arrangements. Spencer was notoriously unfaithful to Louise and later Kate. And here's a partial list of women he supposedly had affairs with: Myrna Loy, Hedy Lamarr, Joan Bennett, Joan Crawford, Ingrid Bergman, Olivia de Havilland, Judy Garland, Jean Turney, and according to one possible report, John Derrick, but we'll never know for sure. In 1941, Tracy made Woman of the Year. It was released in 1942 with Katherine Hepburn, and they immediately began an affair which turned into a lifelong relationship. Katherine Hepburn was born May 12, 1907 in Hartford, Connecticut. Her middle name was actually her mother's maiden name. She appeared in 44 feature films, 8 television movies, and 33 plays. She had a reputation among her peers as independent and a hard worker. She grew up in a progressive household. Her father educated the public about venereal disease, and her mother campaigned for birth control and votes for women. The children of the family were encouraged to think and debate, and she recognized that she came from a remarkable family and was enormously lucky. At one point, she cut her hair short and called herself a Jimmy. All the children were taught to ride, swim, dive, golf. She was an excellent golfer and tennis player. In 1924, she started Bryn Mawr College. She struggled academically, but eventually starred in a play in her senior year, and that turned her toward a career in acting. After graduating, she was cast in several plays in Baltimore and New York, but did not meet with success. In 1928, she was hired as the lead understudy for a Broadway play, but after 2 weeks, she quit to marry Ludlow Luddy Smith. She planned to leave the theater, but soon missed it and returned as the understudy. She took small parts in numerous productions. but was never met with real success. Finally, she was cast in a play, The Warrior's Husband, and she was perfect for the part. That was really her breakout role. A scout for Hollywood saw her in The Warrior's Husband and asked her to test for the part in a film, The Bill of Divorcement, to be directed by George Cukor. Offered the role, she demanded $1,500 a week, a large amount for an unknown actress. Cukor encouraged the studio to accept her demands, and they signed Hepburn to a temporary contract. She starred in A Bill of Divorcement opposite John Barrymore. The picture was a success, and she received positive reviews. In fact, one review said that she had something that set her apart from the picture Galaxy of Stars and made such a impression for such a good impression for such a first picture assignment. On the strength of Bill of Divorcement, RKO signed her to a long-term contract, and George Cukor became a lifetime friend and colleague. He and Hepburn actually made 10 films together. Hepburn's third Hollywood film, Morning Glory, gave her the first of her 4 Oscars. She did not attend the awards ceremony, as she would not for the duration of career, but she was very happy with the win. She then played Jo in Little Women, which was a personal favorite role of hers. By the end of 1933, Hepburn was a respected film actress, but she still wanted to conquer Broadway. She returned to New York City to star in the play The Lake. The Lake previewed in Washington, D.C., where there was a large advance sales, but the director criticized Hepburn and tore her confidence, so she struggled with the play. The play was panned by critics. In fact, that's when Dorothy Parker quipped the famous line, "She wants the gamut of emotions all the way from A to B." Hepburn did not want to continue in the failing play, so she paid the director $14,000 to close the production. She later referred to the director as hands down the most diabolical person I have ever met, and stated the experience was important as it taught her to take responsibility for her own career. In 1934, shortly after that, she obtained a Mexican divorce from Luddy Smith, and she made a series of pictures for over the next couple of years, but none did any good at the box office. She was labeled as box office poison and returned for a short period to live theater. She gained a reputation for being uncooperative and earned nicknames of Catherine of Arrogance. Toward the end of 1936, she vied for the role of Scarlett O'Hara with Gone with the Wind, but Selznick refused to offer her the part based on her reputation. Finally, she got a part in a movie called Stage Door and then Bringing Up Baby. They didn't do well at the box office at that time, but Stage Door was actually nominated as a Best Picture, but it was not a popular film. She continued to be box office poison, and she opted to buy out her studio contract for $75,000. One film critic wrote about her about this period, "No other star has emerged with greater rapidity or with more ecstatic acclaim. No other star either has become so unpopular so quickly for so long a time." Next stop, back to the stage in Philadelphia Story. Howard Hughes, her partner at the time, bought her the film rights even before it debuted on stage. The play was a hit, and there was lots of interest in making the play a movie. Hepburn chose MGM to make the film as long as she was the star and George Cukor, her longtime friend, was the director. Hepburn wanted to make this film to turn her reputation around, and it did. In fact, Time magazine said, "Come on back, Katie, all is forgiven." Hepburn was nominated for her 3rd Academy Award for Best Actor in the Philadelphia Story. Hepburn was also personally responsible for her next project, Woman of the Year, which paired her for the first time with Spencer Tracy. Released in 1942, Woman of the Year was a success. Critics loved the chemistry between the stars, and Hepburn received her 4th Academy Award nomination. Initial impressions between the two stars was a little bit cagey. Hepburn served with, "Mr. Tracy, you're a little short for me." He shot back with, "Don't worry, I'll cut you down to size." Hepburn later said, "She knew right away I found him irresistible." The pair addressed each other first as Miss Hepburn and Mr. Tracy, but within days they were on a first name basis. On occasion, Tracy would refer to her as Shorty or that woman. They also had different styles of acting. Hepburn liked lots and lots of rehearsal. Tracy believed in one take, come to work on time, know your lines, and don't bump into the other actors. Once they connected on Woman of the Year, Hepburn was committed to Tracy from then on. She dedicated herself to helping him because he suffered from alcoholism and insomnia. Her career actually slowed as a result. Tracy was an alcoholic and a binge drinker. Loretta Young once commented that Tracy was awful when he was drunk. He was twice arrested for his behavior while intoxicated. He regularly quit drinking, and there were some long periods of sobriety, but that led to an all-or-nothing routine. Hepburn commented that he could stop drinking for months or even years at a time. He also had depression, insomnia, and anxiety. He was dependent on barbiturates to sleep and other drugs to function. His wife, Louise, once said, "He had the most volatile disposition I had ever seen, up in the clouds one minute and down to the depths in the next. And when he's low, he's very, very low." Hepburn was unable to understand her partner's unhappiness. She wrote in her autobiography, "What was it? Never at peace, tortured by some guilt, some terrible misery." Katherine was devoted to Spencer, and they were partners until his death in 1967. They spent 26 years together. Tracy never returned to live in his family home, although he visited weekly. And Tracy wanted to hide the relationship from his wife, and MGM was careful to conceal the relationship between Spencer Tracy and Katherine Hepburn. Katherine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy did not live together until the final years of Tracy's life, when they shared a cottage on George Cukor's estate. In Hollywood, however, the Tracy Hepburn partnership was an open secret. Many felt that Spencer Tracy was completely dependent on his love, Katherine Hepburn. Neither Spencer Tracy or his wife ever pursued a divorce. Spencer once said, "I can get a divorce whenever I want, but my wife and Kate like things just as they are." Likewise, Louise Tracy reportedly said, "I will be Mrs. Spencer Tracy until the day that I die." Hepburn and Tracy made 9 films together, the last being Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967. In ill health at the time, Tracy was battling heart disease, and the stress of performing while caring for his health put stress on them both. Spencer Tracy died 17 days after filming his last scene on June 10th, 1967. When Hepburn won her second Academy Award for the role, she said it felt like it was a tribute to them both. This is one of the last scenes that they filmed together, and they had a lifetime together. They spent 26 years together, one of Hollywood's greatest romances. This was one of the last photos of them together, a candid scene on the set of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, one of Hollywood's great romances, Katherine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy.